Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at attention in the briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California. At 5'4" and 120 pounds, she knew what the men saw when they looked at her. She had seen that look her entire 12-year military career. Commander Jake "Hammer" Morrison walked into the room, and the casual chatter among the Navy SEALs fell silent. He was a legend. 20 years in special operations, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and countless classified missions that would never see the light of day. His reputation preceded him like thunder before a storm. Sarah had been assigned as the intelligence liaison for Operation Copper Dawn, a high-risk rescue mission in the mountains along the Afghan-Pakistan border. 3 American aid workers had been taken hostage by a terrorist cell, and intelligence suggested they had less than 72 hours before the hostages would be moved across the border, where recovery would become nearly impossible. Commander Morrison's eyes swept across the room, landing on Sarah. He picked up the mission folder and flipped through the pages. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, his voice carrying the rough edge of a man who had spent years shouting orders over gunfire. "I see here your call sign is Ghost Angel." He paused, and a slight smirk crossed his face. "That sounds like something from a video game. Did you pick that yourself?" A few of the SEALs chuckled. Sarah felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. "No, sir," she replied, her voice steady. "It was given to me during my second deployment in Afghanistan." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "By who? Your admin clerk?" More laughter rippled through the room. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "By Captain Mike Dawson, sir. Marine Force Recon. He's retired now." The laughter died down. Anyone in special operations knew that name. Mike Dawson was another legend, a Marine who had earned the Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars. Morrison's smirk faded slightly, but he wasn't done. "Well, Ghost Angel, I hope you brought more than a cute call sign to this mission. We need solid intelligence, not guesswork. My men's lives depend on the accuracy of what you're about to tell us." "I understand that completely, sir," Sarah said. She had been through this dance before. The doubt, the testing, the assumption that she had somehow slid through the ranks on lowered standards or political correctness. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see from looking at her, was what she had survived to earn her place in this room. Sarah had grown up in a small town in rural Montana, the daughter of a Chinese immigrant mother and a father who had left before she could form memories of him. She had joined the army at 18, looking for purpose and belonging. She found both, but not without paying a price. Her first deployment had been to Iraq as an intelligence analyst. Her second, to Afghanistan, had changed everything. She had been embedded with a Marine unit in Helmand Province, providing real-time intelligence analysis in a forward operating base that came under attack almost daily. It was during a mission that went wrong that she had earned her call sign. A patrol had been ambushed, pinned down in a valley with casualties and dwindling ammunition. Sarah had been monitoring the radio traffic when she realized the coordinates being relayed for air support were wrong. The strike would have hit the Marines, not the enemy. She had grabbed her gear, commandeered a vehicle against direct orders, and driven into the kill zone herself. She had reached the patrol, corrected the coordinates, and helped extract 2 wounded Marines while under heavy fire. When the A-10 Warthogs finally arrived and lit up the mountainside, Captain Dawson had looked at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "You appeared out of nowhere like a ghost," he had said later, his arm in a sling from a bullet wound. "And you saved our lives like an angel, Ghost Angel, that's what you are." The call sign had stuck, following her through 2 more deployments and eventually to her current assignment with naval intelligence. But each new unit meant proving herself all over again. Commander Morrison moved to the front of the room, pulling up a satellite image on the large screen. "All right, let's get to work. Ghost Angel, brief us on what we're walking into." Sarah stood and connected her laptop to the display. She had spent the last 48 hours analyzing every piece of intelligence on the target compound, the terrorist cell holding the hostages, and the terrain surrounding the objective. "The hostages are being held here," she began, highlighting a compound in a remote mountain valley. "This is Ahmad Khalil's stronghold. He has approximately 30 fighters, a mix of local Taliban and foreign fighters from Chechnya and Uzbekistan." She walked the team through the intelligence with precision, detailing guard rotations, weapon placements, likely escape routes, and potential complications. She had cross-referenced satellite imagery with human intelligence reports and signals intelligence to build a comprehensive picture of the target. As she spoke, she noticed the expressions in the room changing. The SEALs were leaning forward, asking pointed questions, engaging with the material. This was what she was good at. This was why she was here. But Commander Morrison remained skeptical, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he stood up. That's a lot of analysis based on limited intel. What's your confidence level that the hostages are actually in that compound? Sarah met his gaze directly. 95%, sir. And the other 5%? The other 5% accounts for the possibility that they've already been killed or moved. But every piece of intelligence we have points to that location. If we wait, that 5% becomes 100% certainty that we've lost them. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then he nodded curtly. We launch at 0400, dismissed. As the room cleared, Sarah gathered her materials. She could feel Morrison's eyes on her, but when she looked up, he had already turned away. She had seen that look before, too. The look that said she would have to prove herself not just once, but over and over again. Fine, she thought. I've done it before, I'll do it again. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Sarah worked alongside the SEAL team, refining the intelligence picture, updating the mission plan as new information trickled in from assets on the ground. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and the adrenaline that always came before a mission. Commander Morrison ran his team through rehearsals in a mock-up compound they had constructed based on Sarah's intelligence. She watched from the operations center, noting how precisely they moved, how each man knew his role without needing to be told. These were the best of the best, and despite Morrison's skepticism about her, she respected the hell out of what they did. At 2300 hours, Morrison appeared in the operations center doorway. Most of the staff had gone to grab a few hours of sleep before the launch. Sarah was alone, reviewing the latest satellite pass over the target area. You should get some rest, Morrison said, his tone less sharp than it had been in the briefing. Same could be said for you, sir, Sarah replied, not looking up from her screen. He walked over and studied the image she was examining. What are you looking at? Vehicle movement. A truck arrived at the compound 6 hours ago. It's still there. That's unusual based on the pattern of life we've established for this location. Morrison leaned in closer. Could be a supply run. Could be, or it could be preparation to move the hostages. Sarah pulled up another window, showing intercepted radio communications. We picked up increased radio chatter around the same time. Nothing specific, but the volume is significant. Morrison's jaw tightened. You think we're running out of time faster than we thought? I think we're right on the edge, sir. If that truck leaves before we hit the compound, we may lose our window entirely. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. We can't move the timeline up. The helicopters won't be in position until 0330. I know, sir. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down, his eyes still on the screen. Mike Dawson, he said after a pause. I served with him in Fallujah back in 04, toughest Marine I ever met. He doesn't give out compliments lightly, and he definitely doesn't give out call signs unless they're earned. He turned to look at her. What really happened that day in Helmand? Sarah hesitated. She didn't like talking about it. The official report had been sanitized, the details classified, and she preferred it that way. But something in Morrison's expression told her this was important. This was him actually trying to understand. The patrol was ambushed, she began quietly. Captain Dawson's unit. They were in a valley, taking fire from 3 sides. I was monitoring from the fob when I heard them calling for air support. The radio operator gave the coordinates, but something felt wrong. I checked them against the patrol's last known position and realized the strike would hit them, not the enemy. Morrison listened without interrupting. I tried to correct it over the radio, but communications were breaking down. Too much gunfire, too much chaos. So I grabbed a vehicle and went to them myself. She paused, remembering the fear, the absolute certainty that she was about to die. I made it to their position, got the correct coordinates to the air support, and we got 2 wounded Marines into the vehicle. One of them had lost a lot of blood. I had to keep pressure on his wounds while driving back to the fob. Through enemy fire, Morrison added. Yes, sir. And you weren't even supposed to leave the base. No, sir. I was confined to desk duty for 2 weeks after that. My commanding officer said I had violated direct orders. A small smile crossed her face. Captain Dawson showed up at the hearing and told them if they disciplined me, he'd make sure every media outlet in America heard about how the Army punished a soldier for saving Marines' lives. Morrison let out a low chuckle. That sounds like Mike. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the computers around them. I shouldn't have laughed at your call sign, Morrison said finally. That was unprofessional. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the apology. I've been doing this for 20 years, he continued. And I've seen a lot of people come and go. Some of them were great soldiers. Some of them shouldn't have made it through basic training. But I've developed a bad habit of making assumptions based on what I see instead of what people show me through their actions. He stood up. Your intelligence is solid, Lieutenant. I trust it. And more importantly, I trust you. Thank you, sir, Sarah said and meant it. Morrison started to leave, then turned back. Get a couple hours of sleep. That's an order. I need you sharp when we're on the ground. On the ground, sir. You're coming with us. If the situation changes, if we need real-time intelligence analysis, I want you right there. Can you handle it? Sarah felt her heart rate pick up. She had been in combat zones before, but embedding with a SEAL team on a direct action mission was different. It was dangerous in a way that most intelligence officers never experienced. Yes, sir, she said. I can handle it. Good, we brief final details at 0300. Don't be late. After he left, Sarah sat back in her chair, processing what had just happened. She was going on the mission. She would be with the team when they hit the compound. She pulled out her phone and looked at the screensaver. It was a photo from 5 years ago, taken at a Marine Corps ball. Captain Mike Dawson stood beside her in his dress blues, his arm around her shoulder, grinning like a proud father. He had passed away 2 years later, cancer that had probably been caused by burn pit exposure during his deployments. Hope I make you proud, Captain, she whispered to the photo. Then she closed down her workstation and headed to her quarters. Morrison was right. She needed rest, because in a few hours, Ghost Angel was going to war. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the darkness, flying low over the Afghan mountains. Sarah sat among the SEALs, feeling the vibration of the rotors through her body. She wore full combat gear, a rifle across her lap, and a communications rig that would keep her connected to both the team and the operations center back at base. Commander Morrison sat across from her, his face painted with camouflage, his expression focused and calm. Around them, his team performed final weapons checks with the quiet efficiency of men who had done this hundreds of times. The crew chief held up 5 fingers, 5 minutes to insertion. Sarah's stomach tightened. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never quite like this. This was a direct assault on a fortified compound held by hardened fighters. People were going to die tonight. She just had to make sure it wasn't the good guys. The intelligence package she had prepared was loaded on a tablet attached to her vest. She had memorized every detail of the compound layout, every piece of information they had on the enemy force, every possible contingency. But she knew that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. They would have to adapt. Morrison caught her eye and nodded. She nodded back, drawing strength from his confidence. The helicopter flared and settled into a hover. The SEALs moved like a machine, fast-roping down into the darkness. Sarah clipped onto the rope and followed, sliding down into the rocky terrain below. The moment her boots hit the ground, the helicopter was already pulling away, disappearing into the night sky. The team moved swiftly toward the compound, covering the half-mile distance in near-total silence. Sarah kept pace, her training kicking in, her senses heightened to every sight and sound around her. They reached the outer wall of the compound. 2 SEALs placed breaching charges while the rest of the team stacked up, ready to enter. Sarah positioned herself where Morrison had instructed, close enough to be immediately available but back far enough to not interfere with the assault team. The charges blew with a sharp crack, and the SEALs poured through the breach. Gunfire erupted immediately, the chatter of automatic weapons splitting the night. Sarah moved through the breach with the support element, her heart pounding. The compound was exactly as her intelligence had indicated. 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard. The SEALs moved through with devastating efficiency, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats. Sarah monitored the radio traffic, tracking each element's progress. "Commander, the hostages should be in the north building, second floor, western room," she called over the net. "Copy," Morrison's voice came back, tight with focus. Then everything went wrong. "Contact rear," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted from a position that shouldn't have existed, a bunker that hadn't shown up on any of the satellite imagery. Sarah saw 2 SEALs go down, hit by the incoming fire. The team's momentum stalled as they dealt with the unexpected threat. "It's a reinforced position," Morrison's voice came over the radio. "We can't get an angle on it. We need air support, but it's too close to our position." Sarah's mind raced. She pulled up the compound layout on her tablet, cross-referencing it with what she was seeing. The bunker was positioned to cover the courtyard and the breach point. It was a kill zone. Then she saw it, a narrow alley between 2 buildings, hidden in shadow. It would provide a covered approach to the bunker's blind side. "Commander, I have a route to the bunker," she transmitted. "Permission to move." "Negative, Ghost Angel. Hold your position." But Sarah was already moving. She could see the tactical situation unfolding. The team was pinned. The wounded needed immediate medical attention. Every second they stayed in the kill zone, more men were at risk. She sprinted across the courtyard, bullets kicking up dirt around her feet, and dove into the alley. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady as she moved through the shadows. The alley led exactly where she thought it would, to a position behind and to the side of the bunker. She could see the muzzle flash from the machine gun, could hear the fighter inside shouting in Pashto. Sarah pulled a fragmentation grenade from her vest, pulled the pin, counted 2 seconds, and threw it through the bunker's firing port. She pressed herself against the wall, and the grenade detonated with a thunderous blast. The machine gun went silent. "Bunker neutralized," she transmitted, her voice surprisingly calm. "Ghost Angel, what the hell did you just do?" Morrison's voice carried a mix of anger and disbelief. "My job, sir." The team's momentum resumed. With the bunker threat eliminated, the SEALs pressed their assault. Within 5 minutes, they had secured the compound and located the hostages, 3 terrified but alive American aid workers huddled in the room exactly where Sarah's intelligence had placed them. The team medic worked on the 2 wounded SEALs while the rest established a security perimeter. The extraction helicopters were inbound. Morrison found Sarah as she was checking on the hostages, making sure they were stable enough for transport. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said. "Yes, sir." "You could have been killed." "So could your men, sir. I saw an opportunity to change the tactical situation, and I took it." Morrison stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah prepared herself for the reprimand she knew was coming. Instead, his face broke into a slight smile. "Ghost Angel," he said quietly. "Now I get it. You appear out of nowhere, save lives, and disappear like you were never there." "Something like that, sir." He put a hand on her shoulder. "Good work, Lieutenant. Damn good work." The helicopters arrived, and the team loaded the hostages and the wounded. As they lifted off, Sarah looked down at the compound below, watching it recede into the darkness. She had done it, they had all done it, the hostages were safe. But as the adrenaline started to fade, she realized her hands were shaking. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command once again. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Commander Morrison was there, along with his entire SEAL team. Also present were Rear Admiral James Patterson, the commander of Naval Special Warfare, and a group of senior officers Sarah didn't recognize. The mission had been a success. The hostages had been returned to their families. The 2 wounded SEALs were recovering and would make full recoveries. And the intelligence gathered from the compound had led to 3 additional operations that had significantly disrupted terrorist operations in the region. But Sarah knew that wasn't why she had been called to this meeting. Admiral Patterson stood at the front of the room. "Lieutenant Chen, 3 weeks ago you participated in Operation Copper Dawn as the intelligence liaison. Commander Morrison has submitted a detailed after-action report, which I've reviewed along with the helmet camera footage from the operation." Here it comes, Sarah thought, the disciplinary action for disobeying Morrison's order during the mission. "Your analysis of the intelligence was exceptional," Patterson continued. "Your real-time support during the operation was invaluable. and your actions in neutralizing the enemy bunker position directly saved the lives of multiple team members and ensured the success of the mission. Sarah blinked, surprised by the direction this was taking. However, Patterson said, and there was the word Sarah had been waiting for, you also disobeyed a direct order from your commanding officer in a combat zone. Commander Morrison ordered you to hold your position, and you chose to disregard that order. The room was silent. Sarah stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences were coming. Commander Morrison, Patterson said, turning to the SEAL officer, what's your assessment of Lieutenant Chen's actions? Morrison stood up, his face serious. Sir, in the moment I was focused on protecting Lieutenant Chen because I didn't think she could handle herself in direct combat. I was wrong. Her tactical assessment was correct, her execution was flawless, and her actions saved my men's lives. If she had followed my order, we would have been pinned down longer, my wounded would have been more severe, and the mission might have failed. He turned to look at Sarah. Lieutenant Chen is one of the finest soldiers I've had the privilege to serve with. She has the tactical mind of an intelligence officer and the courage of a combat veteran. The call sign, Ghost Angel, isn't cute or clever. It's earned, and it's accurate. Patterson nodded slowly. I see. Lieutenant Chen, do you have anything to say in your defense? Sarah considered her words carefully. Sir, I understand that I violated the chain of command. In my judgment, the tactical situation required immediate action, and I was in the best position to take that action. If I had it to do over again, I would make the same choice. But I also understand that discipline and following orders are the foundation of military effectiveness. I'm prepared to accept the consequences of my decision. Patterson looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at a folder on the table in front of him. The Navy Cross, he said quietly. Do you know what it takes to earn one, Lieutenant? Sarah's eyes widened. Sir, Patterson held up a hand. Extraordinary heroism in combat, risking your life above and beyond the call of duty. Commander Morrison has recommended you for the Navy Cross for your actions during Operation Copper Dawn. The room seemed to spin. The Navy Cross was the second highest military decoration in the Navy, exceeded only by the Medal of Honor. I've reviewed his recommendation along with the supporting evidence, Patterson continued, and I'm approving it, but there's something else. He picked up another folder. Naval Intelligence has requested that you be assigned as a permanent liaison to SEAL team operations, working directly with Commander Morrison's unit. They want you to continue doing exactly what you did on this mission, providing intelligence support, and when necessary, operating in the field with special operations teams. Sarah struggled to process what she was hearing. This was beyond anything she had imagined. What do you say, Lieutenant? Patterson asked. Are you interested in the assignment? Sarah looked at Commander Morrison, who was watching her with an expression of respect and something that might have been pride. She thought about Captain Dawson, about the Marines she had saved in Helmand Province, about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. Yes, sir, she said firmly. I'm very interested. Patterson smiled. Good. Because frankly, after reading the reports from this mission, I don't think we could stop Commander Morrison from requesting you even if we wanted to. Morrison stepped forward and extended his hand. Sarah shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. Welcome to the team, Ghost Angel, he said. The other SEALs gathered around, introducing themselves properly this time, no longer seeing her as an outsider or a liability, but as one of their own. After the meeting, as Sarah walked out into the California sunshine, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Morrison. Team briefing tomorrow at 800. We have a new mission. Hope you're ready. Sarah smiled and typed back a single word, always. She thought about the young girl from Montana who had joined the army looking for purpose and belonging. She had found both, but the journey had been harder than she ever could have imagined. She had been underestimated, doubted, and dismissed more times than she could count. But she had never given up. She had never stopped proving herself. And now, finally, she had found a place where her skills and her courage were recognized and valued. As she walked across the base, a group of young female sailors passed by. One of them nudged her friend and whispered, "That's her. That's Ghost Angel." Sarah kept walking, but she stood a little taller. 2 months later, the award ceremony was held at the Naval Amphibious Base. Sarah's mother flew in from Montana, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter receive the Navy Cross from the Admiral. Commander Morrison and his entire team were there in dress uniform. When the ceremony ended and Sarah walked through the crowd, Morrison pulled her aside. "You know what the best part about all this is?" he asked. "What's that, sir?" "I get to tell everyone about the time I laughed at Ghost Angel's call sign, and then I get to tell them how she made me eat those words." He grinned. "Keeps me humble." Sarah laughed. "I think you'll survive, sir." "Maybe, but I'll tell you one thing, Lieutenant. I'll never underestimate a soldier based on appearance again. You taught me that lesson, and it's one I won't forget." They stood there for a moment, looking out at the ocean beyond the base, watching the sun set over the Pacific. "Ready for the next mission?" Morrison asked. Sarah thought about everything she had been through, everything she had overcome, and everything that still lay ahead. "Always ready, sir," she said. "Always ready." And in that moment, standing beside a commander who had gone from mocking her to respecting her, wearing a medal that represented extraordinary courage, Sarah Chen finally felt what she had been searching for since that 18-year-old girl had first put on a uniform. She felt like she had truly earned her place. She felt like she belonged. And she felt proud of every single step that had brought her here, even the hard ones, even the painful ones, because they had all been necessary to become Ghost Angel. The legend was no longer just a call sign. It was who she was. And she was just getting started.